thousands of doses of vaccines against childhood diseases, including polio and measles, have begun entering the Gaza Strip to help deal with a growing health emergency. The Palestinian Authority Health Ministry estimates there are now enough vaccinations to last about a year or more. PA health officials estimate that there are about 60,000 newborn babies in Gaza who will need vaccines. Most of them are living now in tents or other temporary accommodations. Israeli health officials have been raising alarm bells recently that highly contagious diseases could spread to soldiers fighting in the Strip, or even perhaps find their way back to civilian communities inside Israel. With me now is Professor Hagai Levine, the head of the medical team for the Hostages and Missing Families Forum. Professor, thanks so much for being with me. How acute, how real is that risk, do you believe, that some of these contagious diseases, which are primarily associated with children, if we're talking about things like mumps or rubella or even polio, is there a risk of soldiers catching these diseases? Is there a risk of them coming back inside Israel and leading to outbreaks here?
Hello, Jeff. We are speaking about current reality. It's already happening. We already see beginning of outbreaks in Gaza. We see the disruption of basic function needed for life in terms of food, water, air, facilities. Specifically, I will add to your introduction, the hostages. The hostages are part of the community of Gaza, of the population. They are there. So we found among the hostages that were released, the survivors, we found salmonella or other infectious diseases that they caught when they were in captivity. So if there are outbreaks now in Gaza, it will directly impact the hostages. It will indirectly impact the soldiers because they have less of contact with the local population, but still they could be affected. And it could have an impact on Israel, on civilians in Israel in general. For example, from environmental perspective, when you send, sewage into the Mediterranean Sea, it goes to Israel, it goes to the desalination centers in Israel, and could disrupt them as happened in the past. So this is not a theory. It's something that is already going on. And that's why I say, also as the chairman of the Israel Association of Public Health Physicians, together with my colleague, the medical community in Israel, that unlike some commentators, it's Israel's strategic interest that there will be no outbreaks and that the public health in Gaza would kept as much as possible during war. Of course, the release of the hostages would be the best way to secure also public health in Gaza, because that's what started this war from the first place.
I want to ask, Professor, just about diseases at large here. I mean, these vaccines are for viral infections, primarily childhood vaccines. But in addition to viruses, there are bacterial infections, there are fungal infections that we know sadly have caused some critical injuries to Israeli soldiers, with open wounds that have been festering, with some fungal infections as well. Besides viruses, what are some other health concerns for the soldiers, for the hostages, even perhaps for Israelis?
So as you said, I mean, infectious diseases in general, I would separate between infections related to injuries, which is one danger, and that must be treated properly, immediately. And again, for the hostages, for example, we know that they are not well treated, and there are infectious diseases that are transmitted via fecal oral route, like gastrointestinal viruses or bacteria. You have respiratory diseases. Now in the winter, there is a danger of flu, of COVID. That's also of concern. For the vaccine preventable disease, that's something we can prevent. And obviously, again, it's an Israeli interest and public health interest that the population in Gaza would be vaccinated, because, you cannot use, there are things that are dual use, for all kind of fuel. You can use it for different purposes, for military purposes, for civilian purposes. But vaccines are only used to protect people's lives. So again, it's Israeli interest that there will be accessibility to vaccines in Gaza, yes, there is a risk. We know that in war zones, there is a risk for outbreaks for measles and rubella and hepatitis A, etc., for vaccine-preventable diseases. So that's something we should pay attention. There is a risk of zoonotic diseases among animals transmitted to humans, for example, for rabies. We know now that there are stray animals in Gaza, and we know that there are rabies cases in other places, but it's also possible in Gaza. So that's something to pay attention.
Is the weather also an impact here? I mean, I want to obviously note that it's winter, it's pouring rainstorms, today throughout the country. It's cold. Does that also play a role?
Definitely. So that's what I wanted to say about the environmental conditions. So the environmental conditions, the quality of the air, and again, war zone, there could be the remainings of buildings, the dust and even asbest from the building. You say about the winter, so there are dangers related to the winter, which is the cold and also a possibility of flooding. That's a specific issue to be examined in Gaza. What are the risks? And of course, the sanitation. We know that the sewage is going up, and that's a problem. And with the rain, who knows what could happen? So I'm saying I don't have, all the answers, and I did not conduct a properly risk assessment for Gaza now, but I think it should be done. And in the past, in Israel, in such wars and operations, there were, the public health professionals who were sitting in the discussion table and analyzing and commenting about the risk, which are a strategic issue. It's not only the responsibility of Israel, it's the responsibility of the Gazans themselves and also the international community to prevent humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And we need, all of us together to find how we prevent humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Right.
And as I said, releasing all the hostages is crucial for any potential solution.
Professor, thanks so much for being with us on I-24 News. Great to have you on this story.
Thank you, Jeff.